Good day, viewers. Welcome to Farming 263 podcast, where we talk about farming and anything farming. I'm your host, Lynn Watson, and in today's episode, we've got a soil health expert with us here today. And please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and leave a comment down below. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. We are there to assist. Now, let me introduce the guest we have here with us. Hello, sir. How are you?
Hello, Lynn. How are you doing?
Fine, thanks. And how are you? Can you
great.
introduce yourself to the viewers out there?
Thank you, Lynn. My name is Mr. Hope Mazungunye. I'm a soil health expert. I trained at UZ, did agronomy, and then also did soil science. I own a consultancy called Green Ogre Consultancy, and that's where I practice. So, yeah, thank you.
Okay. So when you said you do soil health, what is soil health? Maybe to help me and the viewers out there, because it's a very interesting area that not many people know about.
No, thank you, Lynn, for that important question. I think soil health is something that we can define as how well a soil can act as a living component in terms of supporting humans, supporting animals, and just becoming a living ecosystem where, as humans, we can thrive. So it is how well the soil can act as that. So, a soil provides nutrients, a soil provides water, a soil provides shelter for many things, including us as humans, as well as many other organisms for them to thrive. So basically, that's how we can define soil health as.
Yeah. So what are some of the common mistakes that you might have come across when coming to test on soil health?
Okay, so for soil testing, there's very common mistakes that are made in terms of maybe representation of the soil samples to the land, because as you know, the area will be big that we're trying to test for, but we can never really test for the whole big area. We just need to take representative soil samples. So in terms of that, we need to take at least the samples that we feel comfortable to say these are representative of this area. So sometimes we have farmers taking fewer samples than what is necessary. And then sometimes they take samples where they are not supposed to be taken. I mean, we can talk of ant hills, we can talk of where loading bays for fertilizers when you're applying fertilizers, or where we have, some human interference when activities are happening on the farm. So that tends to give bias to the results. So we want to test for these soils where it's in its natural state, so that we see what is in there. So yeah, if we can avoid maybe areas that are like that, that's one common mistake again that farmers can make. Yeah.
Okay, so when testing for soil, right?
Yeah.
What are some of the components you look at?
Okay, so when
when
testing for the soil, we look at the soil fertility for starters. So the soil fertility, it's basically trying to look at the amount of nutrients that are in the soil that can sustain crop growth. So soil fertility usually it involves what we call macronutrients or micronutrients. These are the elements that are required by the plants. We can just, in layman's terms, say these are the food that the plants can take in so that they can grow. They can grow optimally. So we usually test for the macronutrients, which are very important. These are the ones that are required in large amounts. So we can talk of the likes of nitrogen, we can talk of phosphorus and potassium. So these are required by the plants in large amounts. And then we can go to micronutrients, where we can talk of elements like zinc, elements like molybdenum, elements like boron. These are required in minute quantities, but they are very important in key physiological components required for optimal plant growth. So those are some of the things that we test for. And then we can also go on to test for organic carbon, which is basically what other experts may term the backbone of soil fertility. So that is something that we also test for in the soil to try and give us an idea of how fertile that soil is. And then on top of that, we can also test for what we call the CEC, which is the ability of the soil to retain all those nutrients. And then to encompass soil health as a whole, because this is just a component of soil fertility. For soil health now, it involves something which is broader. We're saying this is we're taking the soil as a holistic approach, where the soil also has physical properties. It also has biological properties. So we did the first fertility. We can also test for physical properties, and we can also test for the soil biological properties. And all in all, we can then encompass everything and say, now we have an idea of how healthy the soil is and give recommendations.
That is quite informative indeed.
Yeah.
So do you take farmers through that process? Can farmers do it on their own, or they need an expert in that area?
Yeah, it's always great maybe to have the assistance of an expert, especially when you are starting. Then you can learn, but once you've grasped some of the concepts, there is something that as a farmer they can be able to take their own soil samples. But initially, if it's something that you're not maybe exposed to before, then it will be important to have an expert taking you through the steps that are required to take the soil sample and what is required. And then from then on, after you've learned, I think, yes, it's something that as a farmer, they can take their own samples and bring to the labs.
Okay, how often can this be done by a farmer in terms of testing their own soil? Is there a stipulated period that they should do that, or?
Okay, so in terms of frequency of sampling for the farmers, for me personally, I would recommend that the farmers bring a sample for soil testing once annually. I feel it's important that, if you bring it once annually, you can also be able to determine what's available in your soil, and then you can also make recommendations based on actual soil conditions for fertilizer recommendations, if it is for fertilizer recommendations, and then that farmer can then apply the appropriate fertilizers that are required for that season. So once annually is important, and then also if after maybe a cropping season, obviously soil conditions would have changed, and then if you're going into another season, it's good to also bring a soil sample before, so that you see what's there. So for tracking purposes, it will be important that we maintain, annual samplings, so that we can be able to build up this fertility over time. So for me, I'll just personally recommend that the farmers bring the samples for testing annually.
Annually?
Yes.
Okay. So can you tell us the proper steps of proper soil sampling on a farm?
Absolutely. So when taking soil samples, I think this is a very important question, because this is one of where the major problems happens just before we get the soil sample for testing. So for proper sampling, we have several methods, but I'll just highlight one which is very easy for farmers to do. So initially, farmers should demarcate their area based on visual assessment. So sometimes you can really see visually that there's a difference in this area. Maybe soil color has changed, or we can say maybe the slope has changed, or maybe you have demarcated your farming area into like 4 different areas. So based on those demarcations that you would have made, that's how many samples you should bring, depending on those differences. That's the first initial step that the farmer should do. Then after demarcating the area, or maybe if it's fairly uniform, then we can just have one sample for the whole plot. But if you see differences, you demarcate. Then after demarcating, we use what we call the zigzag method. So the zigzag method is a method where we sort of like draw a Z in the field. So after demarcating our field, whether it is maybe square in shape or rectangular, or maybe to an extent it's sort of like a circle, but still you can apply this Z. So it's like you're drawing a Z through. First you go through across the field, and then you go diagonal to the other corner of the field, and then you complete this Z going to the other end of the field. So that's what we call the zigzag method. What you do is you are looking to take maybe, like I said, representative samples. So we're looking to take a lot more samples. The more they are, the better the sample is going to be. The more it is going to represent what is actually happening in the soil. So I'd advise, maybe if it's a 1 hectare plot, maybe farmers can take between 10, 15, can even go to 20 samples. So you can go maybe 5 across, and then in the diagonal go 10, and go 5 again. on the bottom, and you didn't draw yours yet. And then that's when you're taking now for each spot that you're sampling, make sure you're sampling to a depth of about 20 to 25 centimeters, because that is mostly where the effective root zone depth for plants is for most crops. So that's where the dense roots are, and that's where they can actually access the nutrients. So yes, it's important also to monitor the depth that you're taking the samples as. You can use a soil auger. For most experts on the soil augers, so they can assist with that, or you can actually use a hoe. That I'm pretty sure most farmers, including smallholder farmers, own a hoe. So what you do is you clear on your spot that you're about to sample first for any debris or anything that is there. You just clean it on top, on the surface, and then you just make a V shape if you're using a hoe. Up to about 20 to 25 centimeters, and then after you dig, making a V shape into the ground, you remove what you would have dug, and then you just slice just ahead of where the V is starting, slice again down into the depth that you're digging into, and then what you get in there, you put it into a bucket, small clean bucket, and then you do it for all the 20 spots that I described earlier. Mix it in that one bucket to make what we would call a composite sample. And then from just to highlight, you just have to avoid those areas that I talked about, the anthills. You have to avoid the edges of the field. You have to be at least maybe a meter or two into the field, because there's a lot of disturbances in and around the field. And then after you've done all of that, and then you make what we call a composite sample. So that is you mixing thoroughly all the samplings that you've done in the zigzag manner. And then after you've gotten your composite sample, then from that you can just take about approximately 500 grams of soil, and then you label it clearly with your own reference to the field, and then with also how you'd want the lab to reference it back, so that there's no mix-up for your samples. And then you can send it to the lab after.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So after all these steps, how does it result to like a great yield? A great yield and maybe proper soil management?
Okay, so after taking the soil samples, again, like we discussed earlier, we then look for its fertility, see its fertility status. If it's low in fertility, then we'll make fertilizer recommendations to say, for you to sustain this crop, for you to get optimum yield for this crop, you need this amount of fertilizer. That is common knowledge that we know in agronomy. But your soil is only offering this amount of nutrients. So because of that, there's a difference that will need to be added through external sources. Be it we are using inorganic fertilizers or organic fertilizers. So that's where we then recommend to farmers to say, with what your soil is offering, it only needs this amount of fertilizers to be able to support the optimum yield for that crop. So that's how it helps in terms of maintaining the optimum yield for crops. And then to an extent also, it's also good for the pocket of the farmer, because sometimes the soil is already offering what supports the optimum growth of that crop. So there's no need for you to really be spending money buying fertilizers to try and add more when there's already enough food for the crop to grow. So it will save you money in terms of inputs in your pocket. So again, in terms of that, it will boost the profitability and productivity of the farmer.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when it comes to soil testing, is it friendly to the environment?
Yeah, I think it's a very, very vital practice for the environment, in the sense that this is more like a precision farming. This is a precision technique. Like I alluded to in the earlier question, we are saying you have to apply what is appropriate, what is required. So it assists us or the farmers in terms of applying what is required by the farmer. We don't over apply or we don't under apply. We apply just the right quantities. So for the environment, if we over apply fertilizers, there tend to be leakages through soil erosion, nutrient loss through soil erosion, or nutrient loss through leaching, and this also affects our water bodies. all this leaching, the nutrients that are leached, they go and contaminate our groundwater sources, and then all those nutrients that are eroded, they go and also contaminate our water bodies in terms of maybe rivers or dams. So that is also a negative impact on the environment. But if we can just use just enough, we will reduce in the terms of nutrient losses and also contamination of our water bodies. And also just in terms of sustainability of this soil to support living of many other organisms. Some of these fertilizers, they tend to also affect the ecosystem of other organisms that live in the soil. So in terms of our use of fertilizers, it has to be sustainable to be able to also maintain those living ecosystems. So yeah, for the environment, it is very key that we test for the soil for sustainability. Yeah.
Okay, we heard you talking a lot about fertilizers, right? Can also organic farmers also do soil testing as well?
Yes, absolutely. I think, as we said, soil testing is important for recommendation in terms of providing what is required for optimum growth of the plants. So even for organic farmers, they also need to be productive. They also need to make a profit, even though they are maybe using more sustainable ways of production. So yes, it's important for them as well. What we then just do is to recommend also organic fertilizers, because there are a lot of organic fertilizers that are penetrating into the market right now. So yeah, it won't affect with their crop production systems, but we will be able also to inform them in terms of what the nutrients are required, and then they can use their organic sources to meet that nutritional requirement. So yes, it is important for organic farmers as well.
Oh, that's very important. That's very informative as well.
Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier on that you offer consultancy services. Can we have maybe your phone number or social media handles so that farmers can get in touch with you when they need more advice on soil testing?
Okay, absolutely. Yeah, I offer consultancy services in terms of soil testing, soil surveys, fertility recommendations, agronomic related consultancy services as well. So for my contact details, I'll probably provide my phone number, which is 0784 313 432. So farmers can just contact me on this number, and then we can chat and talk business. And then I'll also give my email address, which is mazungunyehope@gmail.com. So again, farmers may feel free to just email me, and then we can talk and see how we can assist each other to make our soils great. Yeah.
It was a great honor having you on this segment, Mr. Hope.
No, thank you so much, Lynn.
Hope you had it for yourselves, guys. And please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and leave a comment down below. Till we meet again next time.